Hello guys, welcome back to the Beastie Room. We've got an unboxing today. Now this is something that's been a little bit close to my heart, shall we say. This is one of the very first things I ever kept as a child, and they used to be absolutely numerous. They were everywhere. Used to go in your local pet shops and they'd have just old fish tanks with a bit of soil thrown in there and a few bits of bark, and there'd be loads of these things all dumped in there, and they were merely a couple of quid each. I think the most I can ever remember paying for one was maybe a £5, which back then was probably quite a bit of money, but it's very cheap in today's standards. Today these are very expensive. There's no two ways about it. Very expensive. Why is it all the things that we grew up with as kids were next to nothing? They were peanuts. And then nowadays, all these years on, we are now paying fortunes for them. The Chili Rose, that's another spider that was the mainstay of the hobby, and now they're really sought after and there are not so many of them around. Well, this is something a little bit different to a Chili Rose. So what we'll do, we're going to have a little butcher's in there, and we're going to see what we got. Now, like I say, I've been looking for these for some time, and although there's been a few around, there's not many of them around anymore. They really are quite hard to come by, and then even harder to get a reasonable price. But we managed it, and that is, look, they're in there. And this is the Pandinus imperator, which in layman's terms, nicely boxed I must say, heat pack and everything, look, it's all there. Lovely job. Nice and happy in there, weren't they? Now the Pandinus imperator, which the common name is the emperor scorpion. Now these guys were so common back in the day. We used to play around with these as kids. One of the fascinating things with these was when you put them under UV light, they glow, which isn't a particularly great thing to do, because yeah, we're not really sure that it's a nice thing for your scorpion. But even back then, we're talking 30 years ago, even your zoos were putting these under UV lights, and they come out like a greeny blue colour. So not something we really advocate today, but yeah, it shows how things have changed and how our knowledge has improved all the time. Now these really are a cracking scorpion. Now they're very similar to the Asian forest scorpion. Similar in size, although the imperator does get a little bit bigger. These can grow up to around about 8 inches in size. So that is 8 inches from the front, their mouthpiece is literally, to the end of their tail, if you laid their tail flat. So they can get like this sort of size when they're fully adults. Now in captivity they can live for somewhere between 6 to 8 years, maybe get a little bit more if you're lucky. But they are quite slow growing in terms of maturing, so they probably take around 2 to 3 years to mature. Now we've got 3 of them here. Now unfortunately these are probably a little bit too young to actually sex at the moment, so we'll have a few more molts on these, and then we'll find out what they are. But this is one of the things, this is going to be a really exciting project. I've never ever bred the emperor scorpion, and that's one of the downsides to all them years ago. Apart from I didn't have the knowledge that I have nowadays either. I'm a little bit cleverer nowadays, although camera lady wouldn't always agree with that. Mm-hmm. But we back then we had so many of them, there was no need to breed them. And this is one of the reasons why they've sort of like hit decline. These are actually on the CITES list now, and we have to be careful. So there's limited collection of these guys in the wild. They come from West Africa, and they're a forest scorpion. So they actually like the rainforest. So they like a high humidity, and they like it warm. That being said, you can also find them in the savannas, where they'll go out there and they'll actually dig down into termite mounds, which brings us around to their food. Because although these guys grow to an impressive size, 8 inches or so, their actual mainstay diet in the wild is termites, which are one of the very smallest of things, but they take them on. So this is something to bear in mind when we come around to feeding these guys in the in captivity. You know, it's very tempting. You see something that's this big, so we give it something this big to feed. Quite often we need to give them smaller items, and necessarily as well with scorpions, quite often something that's a little bit slower. You know, they're not the Linford Christies of the arachnid world. You know, they're not the fastest things on the planet to chase down food. And although they've got a stinger, it's not an impressive stinger, shall we say. You know, if you get stung by one, the chances are it's just going to feel a bit like a bee sting. And they don't show any aggression towards wanting to use that stinger on us, which again is what made them very, very popular back when I was a kid. So what we're going to do, we're going to have a very simple setup with these. Now, these are going to be for a future breeding project. Like we were saying, I really do want to try and breed these. So normally we put most of our things go into sort of glass enclosures because I do like to see them. But with these guys, we want to grow these on. And I'm going to use these Braplast boxes. Now, these are very, very common boxes within the hobby. And they really are good for this kind of thing. You've got the split lids with them, so we can literally open up just one piece at a time. There is air holes in them as well. So if you're going to house anything that's very, very small in one of these boxes, just be aware there is these holes. Now, there's 4 holes in this size one, and this will give us just enough ventilation in these boxes because we want to maintain that humidity. It's very, very important. These guys really do enjoy good humidity, but we also need to get that little bit of airflow as well, which we will get in these, because obviously we have to be careful when you mix in humidity with heat. You don't want to end up with mold. So it's something you need to play with, something you need to get around, and the more you get used to what humidity really is, the easier you'll find to control that mold. If you've got mold, it's too wet basically. So we're looking again, remember, high humidity does not mean wet enclosures. So we still need to maintain our enclosure to be of a moist sort of thing, but not wet. So what we're going to do, we are going to use our regular, we don't want to use that, do we? See, this is what happens when you collect your own stuff. You get all sorts of stuff in it. We are going to use our own Beastie mix. Now this, as you can see, is full of leaves. There's loads and loads of decaying, rotting leaves in this. Now this is all going to be beneficial in our enclosure because it's all going to add to maintaining some of that humidity, because the leaves will obviously hold moisture. So we're going to put a little bit in there. And as you can see as well, being leaves, it's quite fluffy. So our scorpion will have no trouble at all in burrowing down and getting right inside that. No trouble at all. Be lovely. And we're going to have simple, this is cork bark. Now, we could use bark that we've collected. So say bark from oaks or birch or something like that. We could use that. But I find in this kind of setup, by going with the cork, you'll have maybe a little bit less trouble. When you use the oak bark and things like that in small enclosures like this that are going to have a high humidity, then sometimes they do get a growth of mold, actually goes all over the bark. This in itself isn't a problem. It's more unsightly rather than an issue. So to avoid that, and because we're only in a small area, I'm going to use the cork bark. So we can literally, we're just going to plonk that in like so. We've got a couple of bits here. There we go. So we're going to keep this really, really simple. Now the idea of the cork bark is so that they can get underneath it and get some security. Now they will burrow when they're young, and they will try and hide away. And then they're very nocturnal really. So when it comes the evening times, you'll see them coming out, and quite often you'll hear them before you see them, because you'll hear them tapping on the sides all the time. So what we're going to do, we've got our Beastie mix in there. It's got all this lovely leaf litter in it. That's really good. And then what we're going to do as well, we're going to add some of our sphagnum moss. Now remember, this is sphagnum moss that we get from the garden centre. Big bag like that. I think that was under £10. I think it was like about £8 for a massive, great big bag. I use it in hanging baskets. So just because it doesn't say Rectalicious Fantastico in it, doesn't mean it's no good. Look at what it is. We don't need a brand name to make it work. Right, so we're going to literally pop a little bit of that in there as well. Again, this is just going to help. It's going to end up, that'll all get turfed around and mixed up inside. We won't be able to differentiate it between the leaf litter in the end, because our scorpions can be quite messy little devils, and they are like little bulldozers as well. So we're going to just stick a little bit of this in there. Again, this is just adding to the humidity. It's just helping. And as you can see, this is just damp. This is not. It's not wet. It's damp. Yeah, that's perfect. Right, so we'll throw that down there. We don't need that anymore. Get rid of that. Put that in there. Right. Shall we have a look at our scorpions? Oh, this is the good bit. Right then. We'll go with the little one first. As you can see, these have been packed in moss as well. So we could have actually used the moss out of this box. That would have been okay. That would have been perfectly fine. Here we go. Look at that. You get a good shot of that. What a beautiful, beautiful little thing. Now, when we were saying earlier on, as adults, these guys are very reluctant. They're very placid. They don't really like to use their sting. But as babies, they can be a little bit more sensitive and a little bit more sting happy, shall we say. So we're not going to use our fingers. We're going to use our paintbrush, and we're going to literally just pop that down in there, and we're just going to let him walk out nice and gently. What a stunning little individual that is. There he goes. Very, very pretty. As you can see, that one there is actually quite well fed. That's just that. Looking at that, has just had a big meal, and it's all quite swollen. Now, this is another reason we've chosen to go with these small enclosures, is because we want to really be able to control their food intake and what they're doing and how much they're getting. Now, we've got another one here. Another thing that's worth doing when you've got scorpions of this size is pre-killed food. So we can give them, say at this size, we could give them a large cricket or maybe a roach or something like that, but we can pre-kill it, and then we can just leave it laying in the enclosure. They will come out of a night time, they will find it, and they will then move on and eat it without having to chase it around. So we can guarantee that they're getting their food. Here we go, here's another one. As you can see, this one's quite a bit bigger. Now, one thing that we will notice is as these grow and they mature, the pincers here will end up showing quite a reddish tinge to them. And you'll also, I don't know if you might be able to pick it up on the camera, but they're quite bobbly. They're sort of gnarly. They've got like little pimples all over them. Now, if you look at your Asian forest scorpion, his pincers are smooth and they don't have the red colouring. So that's one way that you can tell them apart. And they're also, as well, you'll see these are very heavy. They're big plates on these pincers. They're very, very powerful. Whereas with the Asian, although they look really big, if you put one up of the same size against an emperor, you'll see the emperor is much more stocky. He's much bigger, powerful. The emperor's quite a fine. They're longer pincers. So that's just another couple of things there that you can do to try and tell them apart. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to move this one down here. You see that? Look, see that? Look, that's turned around straight away to face us. You can see that little tiny pincer there. And we're not bothering it. It's not. Yeah, look at that. He's like, oh, checking out. Look at that. Yes, this is something you're going to get to see a lot of. So what we're going to do now, we are just asking it to gently walk its way down into the new enclosure. There we go. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? And you can see now why, you know, back in the day, these guys were so popular. No, you don't want to be going out. Okay. They can be very quick if they want to be. He doesn't want to let go now. I don't want you going in there either. This one's going on a right old walkabout, isn't he? Maybe we should have kept that apart. What we're going to do... Come on, get back up there. Go back in there. There we go. As you can see, they're fairly easy to move around, do what we need to do. Quite placid, really. I think they have an amazing way of moving. Absolutely stunning. Right, I think what we're going to do, we're going to put the lid on this one because he's very adventurous. Now, we're not going to bother with a water bowl in here for the time being, because the food that these guys will be getting will all be gut loaded food, and it's all going to be really sort of like it's going to be full of fluid. Now we will pre-kill the food for these to save them having to hunt it down, and we can keep a real monitor on exactly what is going on and how they're doing. So we're not going to worry about a water bowl, because to be totally honest with you, once these guys get in there, they will literally turf it up. We'll end up with a wet enclosure. So there is the theory that that everything should have a water bowl no matter what, which to some extent is a good thing. You know, it's not a bad thing, but you need to look at it in a little bit of common sense. If your water bowl is going to produce an environment that is bad, then it's not really beneficial, is it? So we can move away from the water bowl, and we can make sure that they're getting their fluids in their food. So we're giving them really good gut loaded food full of liquid and nutrients, and that is how we can basically tackle the wet problem. Now, as these go into bigger enclosures, as they mature, then we will then add a water bowl, because we can give them something that's a little bit heavier, a little bit bigger, and it will be, you know, the bowl will be in a bigger environment, so it'll be much easier. This is another one. Look at that. This one, you see, this one's a little bit more jumpy than the other two. This one's sort of like he seems very aware. Now you can see the lines down the side here. You can see where the scales of the back and the belly are. He is quite a jumpy little soul, this one. He's not very happy, is he? Do you know what? I'm going to watch my thumb there, just in case. He seems to be having a little bit of a flick about. Now that goes to show, doesn't it? His eyesight, I'm sure he's actually seeing some of this. But as we were saying, you can see there that the scales on the back and the belly, they've split apart, and this is where he's had a good sized meal. So you can see the skin running down the sides. Very obvious. And you can also see it on the back there. You see where the scales are separated? So what we're looking at now going forward is we wouldn't want this scorpion to be any bigger than what you're seeing now in terms of the split in the scales. This is a good indication to show whether you've got a healthy scorpion or an overweight scorpion. A bit like we do with our slings, we can look at their abdomen, and if they're huge, great big swollen abdomens, we know we've overdone it on the food. So we need to cut back and get them back down to a sensible weight. Again, you can see with this guy here, you see all the knobbles on on the claws there. Really, really pretty. And these will only get better with size. I am chuffed to bits with these. Really, really pleased. So what we're going to do, we're going to see if we can't tickle him in. There we go. There you go. Nice and gently. That's it. He's in. Now you might be thinking there that this is this size enclosure isn't particularly big for this size scorpion, and you'd be right. It's not. It's not very big. They don't need too much at the moment. So what we're going to do is we're going to monitor them in these. We're going to see how they go. Once we know that they're feeding and they're doing everything that they should be doing, we can upgrade them to the next size up, which is around about, they're about this big. So they're about 3 times the size of this one here. But we won't do that until we're absolutely certain that they're doing everything that they need to do. And we've also got their husbandry down to, you know, down to pat, so that we know that we're doing a good job. Once we got them few things ticked, then we can move them up and we'll get them a little bit larger. There's no point in putting them in something big just to find out that we're struggling and we can't, you know, we've got problems that we can't seem to sort out. So we will we'll get them sorted now, and then going forward they'll be in the right way. Right, I think we're going to put the lid on this one as well, because he's probably going to be out in half a chance. Quite a feisty one, that one. Look at that, he's really going for it. So that's a very interesting thing there. We've had three scorpions and 3 totally different behaviours. You know, that's really interesting. We'll have to keep an eye on this one. We might put a little sticker on him, little danger sticker. He's a bit of a handful. Right, well that is the Emperor Scorpion, and it's going to be a very, very exciting project. Now, in terms of breeding, we're probably going to have between 2 and 3 years before these are fully mature. So they're probably, well, they're a year or so old now. So we might be looking at between 15 months and 2 years before we can attempt to put them together and see what we got. We need to sex them first as well. So once we know what they are, we'll give that a go. But it's going to be a long-term project. Like many of these projects, the problem is the stuff isn't available to get, so we have to start at the beginning, and then we have to wait until things mature and so on and so on. But it ain't going to be long. It's going to be exciting. Right. Well, I hope you enjoyed that, and I think we've covered pretty much everything with these guys. They are relatively simple to look after. They're not difficult at all. So it should be real fun. Right then, don't forget, be calm, be gentle, and love your spider and your scorpions and your frogs. Everybody. See you soon, guys.